The Inspired Writer Podcast, a podcast that explores all things writing and publishing, from author interviews, insights from industry experts, writing tips, and much, much more. On this episode of the Inspired Writer Podcast, I'll be talking with author Kit Berry about her inspiration behind her Stonewylde series of 5 books with one dark tale. The series tells a contemporary story about the hidden place of Stonewylde, based in Dorset. Expect folklore, paganism, intrigue, and dark secrets. Nothing is as it seems in this idyllic place. Stonewylde has captured the imagination of readers so much so that a whole community has grown up around it, and I'll be asking Kit about the importance of having and growing your readership. You can visit her website at www.stonewylde.com. So welcome, Kit, to the Inspired Writer Podcast.
Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And I know that Stonewylde, I've read the first book, is really unique in that it captures the old and the new world and it brings it all together. So what is your inspiration, or what was your inspiration behind it?
Well, my mother had died, and I was walking in some beautiful beech woods one evening with all the sunlight coming down through the green leaves, and suddenly there was this huge golden creature sitting on the path in front of me, and I stopped and I couldn't quite believe it, and I thought at first it was a fox, but it wasn't. It was a hare, and it was just sitting there looking at me, and it was only about 2 meters away, and we just had this eye contact and something passed between us. It was just a magical experience. And that's really what inspired me. And then it just turned around and loped off into the undergrowth. But I felt totally touched by its presence. And I went home and started researching about hares and all the folklore and mythology around hares, and was totally intrigued. That's really what inspired me.
And this is what inspired this idea and the creation of Stonewylde itself?
Yes, but also because I lived in Dorset at the time, I was living just outside Weymouth. I used to drive past this big country estate called Charborough Park, called the Drax Estate, and it was behind all these long stone walls, and this was in the 90s when I used to drive past it, and I used to think there could be anything going on there and nobody would ever know because it's all walled off with great big iron gates and everything. And so that's what sort of started me thinking about the idea of an enclosed community hidden away from the outside world, where all sorts of weird things were going on.
It's incredible, isn't it? I think sometimes we feel that writers come up with the idea, they think about it for hours and hours and hours, but it's also about inspiration, which I think it doesn't come from the mind, does it?
No, it's much deeper within. I think it's from your soul, and it gestates, and then when it's ready to be born, it comes out.
It comes out when it's when it's ready, a bit like a baby, or I'm going to say nature itself. When it's ready, it will bloom. It actually bloom.
Yes.
And what I find fascinating is you originally wrote this, for it was a YA audience, a young adult audience, but your readership is there's a range of ages.
I think the oldest reader is in her 80s.
That is absolutely incredible.
In fact, I would say the majority of readership is adult. Obviously, some young adults do read it, and I do school visits and things, but most of the readers are adult.
So why do you think it appeals to adults so much? What is it about Stonewylde itself?
I think, I wrote it, it's in the magical realism genre, because personally I believe in nature's magic. So it's not fantasy to me, it's something real, but it is magical. And I think when you write, a lot of yourself and your experiences go into it. So I think a lot of the experiences that the characters go through touch people, because a lot of people have also experienced that. Things like rejection, being bullied, not feeling good enough, all those sort of things people can identify with.
I think, that it's a really insightful point that you've made, actually. I hadn't thought about that, but the characters that you create when you're writing your book, they're almost elements of yourself, aren't they?
Yes, they are, all of them, all different aspects of yourself, I think, or people that you've been close to.
And also your experiences, you're right. And sometimes you
Yes.
don't realise that you've been touched by an experience, but it might come out
Yes.
in an actual character.
Yes.
And I do, what I love about reading Stonewylde is that it touches on some really contemporary issues. And one of them is the getting back to nature. It's
Yes.
about being in touch with nature. It's about, it touches on, climate change.
Yes. I mean, when I first started writing, it was 2003. I think the whole sort of idea of reconnecting with nature and the eco movement wasn't really happening then to the extent it is today. But I've always felt this huge connection with nature, and it was always my way of dealing with things was to go out and walk and just to immerse myself on my own, hopefully, and just feel the beauty and the glory of nature. But I think, nowadays, I mean, I've been involved with the International Forest Therapy movement in Finland. And I think now there's a big movement towards that. And they say that for mental health, it's very healing to just get out.
And not to give too much away, the main character, the main protagonist within the book, actually needs to get back to nature due to health.
Yes. Yes, I mean, the two... This is why I thought I was writing for YA, because the two characters, the two central characters, Yule, the boy, and Sylvie, the girl, are 14 and 15 when the first book starts, which is why I imagined I was writing for young adults. But obviously throughout the series, they grow up. And I think we all remember experiences from when we were teenagers, because they're such formative years. And things that touch you very deeply, then you remember them, don't you? When you
absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely, and they'll come out in your writing,
yes,
consciously or unconsciously.
Yes.
And when you take a look and you observe, thinking, because we do, in a sense, write about what we know and what we've experienced,
definitely,
or maybe what we've witnessed somebody else experience. But there is that connection, isn't there, about writing about what you know.
Yes.
And as you say, what I love about your characters is that there is a three-dimensional quality about them. They aren't your perfect character cut-out characters, and
they're all very flawed.
Yeah,
yes.
And that I think adds a depth and strength to it. And what I find really fascinating about your journey is that you wrote the first 3 novels, and you created your own readership, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I know you are going to read us a little bit from Stonewylde, but I really wanted to focus on that, because for many writers, and particularly new writers, and when you're looking to write, you think the battle is writing the book,
No.
but actually that's
the easy bit. Well, not easy, but simple.
Well, it's more under your control,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
So for you, how did you go about, because you did grow a massive readership, there's a Stonewylde community and everything. How did you create or come up with that concept and that idea?
Well, I wrote the first 3 books as one huge book, and I wrote it while I was still teaching full time. And I used to start writing at 9 o'clock in the evening and finish about 3 in the morning, and then get up for work at 7 the next morning. And I got an agent who was a young adult agent, and she loved the books, and she pitched them to all the different publishers. They all rejected them, saying they loved the story, but they felt it was too adult. I should have known then, shouldn't I?
But the thing is, you self-published first of all, didn't you?
Well, that's what she said. This is back in 2004, all these rejections. And she said, look, in those days, self-publishing was a dirty word. It's not like today where it's easy on Kindle and advertising. And
not
Amazon.
Quite so dirty.
But it was seen as vanity publishing then. That's what it was called.
Yeah.
And she said, look, I can't bear to think of Stonewylde mouldering away in a cupboard. She said, why don't you self-publish? So I started looking into it, and then I met the man who I ended up marrying, my second husband, who's lovely, and he helped me format the books. And we decided to set up, rather than doing it through a vanity publishers, we decided to set up our own publishing company, Moongazy Publishing, which we did, and got the first book out there, and I suddenly thought, I think the first print run was 600 books, and they were sitting there in the garage. And I thought, now what do I do? What do I do with all these books? So I was still living down in Weymouth at the time. So I started going around to local shops and saying, would you be interested in taking a few of my books, sale or return? And did it that way. But then, and this is before, this is in the days, this is 2005. Facebook existed, but it was just for American students then. It wasn't like it is today. And people just weren't on it. So I started getting, my husband set up a website for me, and I started getting emails via that from readers who wanted to discuss it and talk about it and things. And he said, right, let's set up a forum. Now, I always thought forums were something a bit dodgy, but he said,
where you meet strange folk.
Yes. But he said, no, we'll set up a Stonewylde forum. So that's what he did. And soon all these people were piling in, because we put it on the website, obviously. And it's lovely. There are actually 5 couples together today who met through my forum, which really fills me with happiness, that, because they had something in common.
That's so fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, that's quite an achievement, because you had the forum,
yes,
and then you went on to do this actual community where you meet.
Yes. So I used to go to a lot of sort of health and healing type events and give talks about the power of nature and the healing power of nature particularly. Now, I'm not knocking health and healing fairs, please don't get me wrong, but I saw a lot of rip-off merchants at some of them. People would charge a fortune for some weird sort of aura imaging, for instance. Charge like 80 quid for that, which, what good does that do you really? And I remember there was one event I was at, there was this old guy sitting there, and he had runes, which were considered, not like today where everyone's into runes.
Yes.
And he would sit there, and I was next to him with my little store of books, and he said exactly the same thing to every single person. And he charged a fortune.
Oh, wow.
And it was all middle-aged women. And again, I was a middle-aged woman, so I totally understand that feeling of thinking, OK, where is life going now? My best years are behind me, now what? Which is not true, actually. But
no, the years get better.
Yes, they do. But anyway, so women would come up, and he'd say, and they'd sit down, and he'd make them cast the runes, and he'd say, oh, you've suffered. Oh, how you've suffered. And he said the same thing to every person who sat there. And of course, the poor women would burst into tears at that point, and then they were just putty in his hands. So I would give talks about how you don't need all this stuff. All you need to do is get outside, somewhere beautiful if you can, or if not, in a park, just with trees and landscape and nature, and you will heal yourself. That sounds a bit simplistic now, but it actually does help.
Funnily enough, it is being recommended that spending time in nature is really great for your well-being.
Yes.
So
because you ground yourself, and you realise that you're part of this planet. We're all part of the same thing, and you're just one tiny little speck part of it. And so it sort of takes all your big issues away, because you realise that actually you're just like a star up in the heavens. You're just one little tiny part of it all. And
you actually weave that into your Stonewylde novels quite seamlessly. And again, it's another one of the messages that comes through. So you went from the forum, and then you created this Stonewylde Community. You meet once a year, don't you?
Yes.
Is it an annual?
Yes, we have a camp once a year. A lot of the Stonewyldes wanted to get together and meet up, and we were slightly wary, because we thought, will that sort of spoil it? But I actually hired a lovely place down in Dorset called Monkton Wild. We hired the whole building for the weekend. It's a Victorian Gothic mansion type place. And we had a get-together. There were 50 places, and they filled up straight away. And it was actually at the harvest moon. And we all stood outside watching the moon rise. And it was just magical. It was just, the whole weekend was so special, because a lot of the people I hadn't met before, they were just on the forum. And as I stood there, I thought, I want to get these books out further. And that's when I made the decision to try again and get them published and by a mainstream publisher.
And what's really interesting is this time round, because you had built your readership,
yes,
and you could, you've shown that these books sell, you then got an offer.
Yes. By that point, we kept having reprints. The first print run was 600, then we went to 1,000, then we went to 2,000, and then we were doing 5,000. So altogether, I can't remember exactly, but I think we sold about 20,000 of each of the 3 books which were out.
And that was before,
point.
This was self-publishing?
Yes, self-publishing. And then I got another agent, and he pitched them to Galant's, and they bought them. And with 2 more, because my eldest son was the one. He said, "Mum, you can't let it finish there." He said, "Come on, what happens next?" And I'd always had this thing in my mind about what would happen next. So I sold it. It was a 5-book deal with Galant's.
And for me, what's really encouraging is that sometimes people will self-publish because there's a lack of belief in themselves and their story. And also there's a fear that if I've self-published this book, a traditional publisher won't want it. But that's not true.
No. If you can show you've got the readership and the reach. And I was still doing lots of talks. I was going to all sorts of events. And I also do school visits to secondary schools, because I used to be a school teacher, and I missed that side of it. So that was fun. But yes, that's how it sort of grew. And the forum definitely helped. And then, of course, Facebook took over. And gradually we noticed that the forum was much quieter because everyone was communicating on Facebook. So then we folded the forum in the end, which was a shame.
Yeah, but, as I said, you're now traditionally published. You've published 5 of the books, and your readership continues to expand and grow. And it's one thing, it's the one aspect that I think as a writer you don't take that into consideration. You've just shared with me that you started your own business, and I think writing is a business.
Oh, yes.
You have the wonderful artistic creative aspect of it, but you have to treat it as a business.
Definitely. And we used to get little leaflets printed, and a lot of the Stonewylde readers would say, "Can I have some leaflets? Because I want to tell my friends about your books." Because, it's word of mouth, really.
Sure.
I think if people love the books enough, they will tell all their friends. And that's, I read things recommended by friends. And so we coined the term promo pixies. So these were all my little promo pixies. And I used to post off all these leaflets to them, and they just spread them, all over the country and abroad as well.
So if I were to ask you, would that be your top tip if you're looking to grow? What would be your top tip or your tips for growing your readership?
I think you need to get yourself out there and give talks. I think that helps. And, again, it used to be my biggest fear was public speaking, but now I'm fine, because I've done it so many times. So I think you have to overcome that fear. But I think also valuing your readers. We built a real community, and I would count those initial people particularly as friends. We meet up once a year now. We have a camp now near Avebury, and it's lovely. It's just like being amongst friends. We all know each other so well. It's really special.
Oh, fantastic.
We don't do workshops and things. We just literally all hang out together and, have a campfire in the evening and go off to visit Avebury and the Stones and just chat,
But it's that connection and connecting.
Yes.
And I think for people who have a favourite author, who follow you, it's one of the things writers possibly miss out on, the connection with their readers, not just at odd events, but actually making it quite personal to you. And I think now where self-publishing and novels, that's just rocketed.
Yes.
Having a readership where you care about your readership, and they and that loyalty, you can't buy that.
No. I've always felt so honoured that people love the book so much and talk about them as if they're real. They actually talk about Stonewylde like it's a real place, and they talk about their characters like they're real people, and that's such an honour that people took it all that seriously,
Sure.
And it's very flattering.
And if people want to come, obviously, just remind us where we can, readers can contact you and get your books as well.
Well, they're on Amazon, obviously. Some bookshops still stock them. They've been out quite a few years now, so I think they've dropped off. And obviously, sadly, with the demise of so many independent bookshops, they were one of the mainstreams.
And then website
the
as
website,
well.
Yes, it's a Stonewylde website, and I've also got a Kit Berry website. But yes,
perfect. I know,
and I'm on Facebook. Obviously.
So if you can contact Kit at kitberry.com.
Yes.
And stonewylde.com, and
Yes.
that's Stonewylde, wild with a WYLDE.
Yes.
.com. And I know you're going to read a little extract from your book.
Yes. This is I've chosen this because it's about Sylvie's moon gaziness. She basically starts off, she's in London, she's dying of these hideous allergies, and she's very, very ill, and she gets taken to Stonewylde, this magical community down in Dorset, for healing. But she always was affected by the full moon, and I've always had a thing about the moon because of that lovely poem by Walter de la Mare, Silver, about the moon walking the night in her silver shoon. And I've loved that poem for years, and I've always imagined the moon as this bright lady walking and touching everything with magic. So it was obvious that Sylvie was going to be moon gazy, which is based on it used to be called moon gazing, but I call it moon gazy, like in the Cornish stargazy pie. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't actually, so we'll have to look that up on the internet.
Yes, they have this pie.
We'll ask Google.
Yes, a pie with fish that are all looking up.
Oh, wow.
So this is the first time. So in London, when she was so ill, every time there was a full moon, her mother would be really worried. And obviously this is where the term lunatic comes from, because some people are affected by the moon. The mother thought she was mentally ill, but in fact she's just affected by the magic of the moon. And it's not till she gets to Stonewylde that she understands what it is. Rippling over her shoulders and down her back. Her feet and legs were bare beneath the blue dress, and she skipped in her haste. Then suddenly she stopped dead. Yule almost ran into her. Slowly she started to raise both arms into the air as if unfolding her wings. Yule felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. Was she mad? What on earth was she up to? She turned to face him, and he blinked in shock. This deep in the woods the light was fading fast, but he could see enough to recognise that she was in some kind of a trance. Her beautiful silver-grey eyes were wide open and fixed. Her lips were moving, and the strange noises still poured from her. She stared upwards through the branches, her arms stretched to the heavens, and then the truth dawned on him. He'd seen moon-gazy hares like this. He knew about moon magic. She was in the thrall of the rising full moon and was glorying in it. He'd known she was special from the very first moment he'd seen her walking in the woods with Magus. She was moon-gazy, and now he understood and knew how to help her too. It was violet twilight when they reached the summit of the hill. A single standing stone rose from the ground, ancient and sacred. The grass here was cropped short by the nibbling of many teeth. It was the place of the hares. Yule led Sylvie towards the stone, and when they reached it, he gently turned her around. They looked together across the purple folds of land stretching away towards the sea. On the horizon floated the moon, pink and misty. A strange keening rose from Sylvie's throat, a cry of mingled joy and longing. Yule still held her elbow and felt her body shudder. Her arms rose up again as if she spread her wings, and he let her go. She needed to dance, to fly. She raised herself onto tiptoes, poised, and then she was off. Yule slid down to the ground in his usual spot, his back against the tall standing stone, and watched her dance. She seemed to fly over the grass, skipping, leaping, arms reaching out in joy. She was as graceful and light as thistledown in a summer breeze. She danced around the stone in a great spiral, sometimes singing her strange song, sometimes silent. Her silver hair flew out and her white limbs flowed. Yule had never witnessed anything like it. She was joined by a trio of hares, speeding long-limbed around the magical circle. Yule had seen hares do this before, but he'd never dreamt they'd dance with a girl, even one so moon-gazy. The moon rose from her violet bed, up and across the sky, turning first pink gold, then gold, and finally buttermilk silver. Shy stars prickled through the darkening sky to take their place in the dance. And still Sylvie danced with the hares, more gently now. The silver of the moon gleamed on her hair and in her eyes. Her skin glowed like pearl in the moonlight. And at last, her energy spent, she sank to the ground near the stone. She knelt with her head thrown back, gazing up at the moon. Yule watched her in wonder. The hares too had stopped and sat a little distance away, their long ears laid down against their backs as they moon-gazed. Something deep within him started to awaken, to stir for the very first time. Yule closed his eyes and sighed, feeling tears peppery and hot behind his eyelids.
Oh, that is absolutely magical.
I'm sorry, I got a bit emotional reading that. And if anyone has read all 5 books, they'll know why.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to reading the second, which is Moondance or Stonewylde, reading the rest of them as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me, be my guest on the Inspired Writer podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
It's been inspirational.
Good. Thank you.
And if you have enjoyed this particular podcast, great thing is share it with your friends. Look out for the Stonewylde books as well. Remember, you can go to Kit Berry's website, and also you can go to the www.stonewylde.com.
And the other final thing I just would like to say is that I'm currently in negotiations to have the series adapted for a TV series. So fingers crossed that will happen.
Well, that's really, really exciting. It just goes to show, doesn't it, that, from self-publishing, your self-belief, and taking action to grow your readership can actually bring you dividends. Wishing you all the very best with that.
And it was all thanks to that hair.
Well, thank you to the hair as well. And I hope you will come back onto the podcast and keep us updated with what's happening with the adaptation of your book to a series as well. So just a reminder for those of you who are listening to the Inspired Writer podcast that you can share this, you can access this via YouTube as well. Do share if you have any questions about writing or questions for our guests, or books that you are your particular favourites. Do get in contact with me. You can access this particular podcast on my website, www.naseemassen.com, and drop me an email. Bye for now.